Now moving on to a more complex use cases of managing our classes. So let's bump our code down so we can see things a bit more clearly. Now what I'm going to do is take this donut promo card and just copy it, removing it from our class binding. Now we're going to change this over to ng and then class with a capital C. This is then going to give us an error, and this is because we're just passing in a simple boolean, which type boolean is not assignable. To type of string, so we can pass in a string to ng class. We can also pass in an array of strings to ng class. We can also pass in a JavaScript set, but most commonly we'll be using this object form where we can pass in a string property with any kind of value. So that means that we can pass in a class that we want to add or remove, and then an expression in the form of an object. So essentially we want to do something like this, and I always like to put these onto new lines. So because it needs to be a string, we can add some quotes. If we were to add this without the string, we're then going to see an error because it's not a valid JavaScript class name if we want to use the hyphens. So now we've provided the class that we want to add, we then need to provide the condition. So here we're going to say donut.promo. We can hit save. Nothing is actually going to physically change. There will be one small change, and that is the fact that Angular is going to be using this ng-reflect and then ng-class just to simply manage it underneath the hood. So why use ng-class over this class binding? I prefer to use ng-class all the time. If I just know that I'm going to have one single class, I will use the inline class bindings. It's quick, it's concise, it looks great, and it's nice and easy to actually visualize without having to go through the object and read each class in particular. But you know what happens in projects. We add one class and then it becomes two and then three classes as our project scales and our requirements grow bigger. So I typically use ng-class straight off of the bat. It's a nice way, it's also very type safe for us to manage our classes. Which also means if we wanted to perhaps add a donut card, new, we could do something like this. And we could say donut.new. Now we don't actually have this property, so I'm just going to change this over to true, so we can then see this class being added. You can see donut card and then -new being added alongside our promo. So Angular is managing all of this for us in one single place. And I think you can agree that it looks a lot nicer rather than having things all on one line or mixed within class bindings. Now, because we are using an expression, we can also invert these. So let's say donut.promo, and this is just an example for you. We're going to say for anything that's not a promo, we're going to add a class that literally says this is not a promo item. So I hope this gives you some interesting ideas on how you can then compose your classes based off of a certain condition. And I think this is far easier to read. We can read the value and know that it is an expression. So here we have our promo, which means that we should have a donut card not promo. So this is conditionally adding the class. You can see that we can add them all in one place and Angular will intelligently add them. So this class doesn't match, so it doesn't add it to the element. This does match, so it's then added to the element, at which point we have then finished looking at all of the class definitions. Angular will then move on to the next element. So I hope this gives you some nice information and some use cases on dealing with complex classes in Angular. And I think this demonstrates the power already of adding and removing classes based on the data structures that we are then given. We just simply accept the data via an input and we just hand things off to Angular to add and remove those classes for us. We don't need to start dealing with JavaScript selectors and event listeners for clicks perhaps, and then dealing with the JavaScript class list API. Angular is doing all this for us under the hood. So I hope this also gives you an idea of the power of the directives, and there is so much more that Angular can do for us. This is really just the basics of Angular and the power that it can really give us. So as we progress further through this course, we're then going to see our productivity surge as we can then just delegate lots of complex tasks off to Angular, and we know that they're taken care of. We don't have to worry about writing tests and making sure that our code is valid for simple tasks such as adding and remove classes, showing and hiding elements, cleaning up event listeners, and things that we would typically as developers trip up on now and again. So with that in mind, let's dive into the next lesson.